Remember this.
The miracle is in the "we sent down the iron" part.
That clip was taken from a video I made a little while back, debunking the so-called miracle of iron in the Quran, perhaps the most often quoted and seemingly impressive, to Muslims at least, of the claims of miraculous scientific knowledge within the Quran. People say when I make fun of religion that I drive away the moderates, but if a little joke drives them away, perhaps they weren't as moderate as you think. And, as you may have noticed by trying reason alone, the first dent in the wall is the hardest to make. Now, rationality and logic can do it. Good arguments and evidence can do it. But humour can do what none of those things can do. None of those things can help someone who is afraid to think, afraid to look at the evidence. But fear cannot prevent someone from seeing a joke. To make someone who is afraid laugh, to actually see with their own mind the funny side of something that would be completely hilarious if it wasn't so deadly serious, is sometimes more powerful than all the logic and reason there ever was. Wouldn't you, if you had a good friend who was starting to talk a little crazy, wouldn't you, after all the reasoning has failed, after all the evidence has failed, wouldn't you try everything to make that friend see how crazy he's acting? A friend would tell them. The liar would encourage them. The ones who are typing "racist pig" in the comment bar at this very moment, well, this obviously wasn't their day to do some thinking. Let's see if you're any different. Back to the miracle of iron. In my earlier video I said that the miracle had two aspects, one being that the verse says iron was sent down, a scientifically accurate statement inasmuch as iron does come down from above, from space. The other claim was that Muhammad couldn't have known meteorites contain iron 1400 years ago. Now, the sent down part can be easily dismissed as poetry when one notices that in Surah 39 verse 6 the Quran says cattle were also sent down. Unless one is imagining the terrified mooing of parachute packing cows as they enter the Earth's atmosphere, sent down is obviously just a poetic way of expressing a gift from God. The historical fact that Muhammad almost certainly knew meteorites contained iron, without knowing what either of those things really are, was covered in the original video, along with the observation that Muhammad only mentioned iron, the only element in his day known to arrive from above, when in fact all 94 naturally occurring elements came to Earth from space. Now, in a universe with around 100 elements, if Surah 57 verse 25 is a test of Muhammad's knowledge of the origin of those elements, the Prophet scored slightly over 1%, and I do not believe that is enough to pass any test. But, as has been recently explained to me, there is a third aspect to the so-called iron miracle, one that I did not cover before, one that, so I am told, is the real iron miracle. The claim is that it's a miracle that Surah 57 in the Quran is called iron, and 57 is the atomic mass number of iron, the most stable element known. Many Muslims, but thankfully not all, think it's 1 billion to 1 shot, or 10 billion to 1, a sign, a miracle. Some Muslims cannot explain how a chapter called iron could be found in the 57th chapter of a book without the supernatural intervention of the creator of the universe. If you think no one really believes this stuff, take a look in the comments section below. This idiocy can be made to look so tasty by liars and madmen that people will swallow it without chewing it first. Down in the comments section I have provided, free of charge, examples of Muslims who will defend the proposition that the 57th chapter of a book cannot be called iron unless a god wrote it. Don't you dare tell me this stuff isn't funny. The following is my response to the real miracle of iron in the Quran, the 57 miracle, as I shall call it. The atomic mass number of an atom is the total number of protons plus the total number of neutrons in that atom's nucleus. In my extensive research for this video, I found nothing to suggest that the laws of physics forbid humans from using the name they gave to the atom with 26 protons as the title of the 57th chapter in any book. But let's not let sense get in the way, shall we? Let us similarly ignore the fact that there are 3 stable isotopes of iron, and that the most stable form has atomic mass number 56, not 57. Let's just shrug that all off. It's no surprise that an element gets named after the metal it is. It's no miracle that a chapter gets named after the most important metal of the day. Any book with a chapter named after iron has about a 1 in 100 chance of performing the same miracle claimed by Muslim literalists. But if I asked you to pick a number between 1 and 100 and I guessed that number correctly, would you call it a miracle? Would you call me a prophet? Would you worship me? Would you say peace be upon him every time you mentioned my name? Of course not. It's absurd. You're a trillion light years from that stupid. And if I asked you why you wouldn't worship me, you'd laugh in my face. Quite rightly. You'd say 1 in 100 is nothing. It's no miracle. This kufir must be insane. And again, you'd be totally correct. But look at the verse. Muhammad did not mention atoms, although the word was already 1,000 years old before Muhammad was born, as used by the Greek philosopher Democritus. The angel Gabriel did not teach Muhammad this Greek word and how to use it. Muhammad did not say that at the heart of the smallest piece of iron there were 57 smaller pieces, or that 26 of these inner pieces tell matter what kind of matter to be. He did not say that there were 100 kinds of substance, or that almost all of it came from the stars to become the building blocks of humans and everything they see around them. Muhammad had no idea about any of these things. All he did, at best, was name a chapter in a book after a useful metal known to him. And if it isn't immediately obvious why a leader, no stranger to the Bronze Age battlefield, would try to impress upon his followers and his armies the importance and the value of iron, well, just type ignorant racist pig again. You'll feel better. Without knowing anything about how many elements there are, or what an element is, or how they are formed, anyone, in Muhammad's day or any day since then, could have written a book and for whatever reason called the 57th chapter Iron, and performed one of Islam's greatest miracles. From the moment Surah 57 was named Iron, there was approximately a 1 in 100 chance of a miracle by modern Muslim standards. But earlier you said, wisely I thought, that you wouldn't worship me based on a 100 to 1 shot. You would have laughed at the idea, called it absurd, called it insane. This is what's called inconsistency. Unless you tell me that you will worship me if I guess a correct number between 1 and 100, then you must agree that the 57 miracle is not a good reason to worship anything or anyone. It's not miraculous that Muhammad would see the value of iron swords, a metal by which civilizations would rise and fall. From then on, it's approximately a 1 in 100 chance. Statistically, it's not even interesting, let alone miraculous. With so many words in so many holy books, it's no miracle that poetic bridges can be built between reality and imagery. It can be done with even remotely poetic writing. I think you see what's not there because someone you trust, or want to trust, told you that it was there, like a friend pointing out a pattern they see in the clouds. Once they point and describe it, you see it too, although you couldn't see it before with your own eyes. The beauty of poetry is that we can all read into it what we wish. The great danger of poetry is that we can all read into it what we wish. Poetry often allows us to see the truth that we want to see. For example, consider the following line: a burning fire, a red-hot iron, the iron of the executioner. Now that could be describing an iron-rich meteorite entering Earth's atmosphere, or perhaps an asteroid, something utterly unknown at the time of writing. For what poetic term could better describe an asteroid than the executioner? But this is not a line from the Quran. It's from The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. And irony of ironies, I wonder if you can guess which chapter it's from. That's right, chapter 57. But, I hear some Muslims cry, it is not merely the mentioning of iron in chapter 57 of the Quran. Iron is in the title of the 57th chapter, and this clearly shows that Muhammad knew that iron came from stars via stellar nucleosynthesis. It's in the title. But what about this chapter title? Of whales in paint, in teeth, in wood, in sheet iron, in stone, in mountains, in stars. This is clearly saying that whales and teeth and wood and iron and stone are made from the stuff found in stars. Miracle. This chapter title clearly shows a better understanding of stellar nucleosynthesis, and it contains both the words iron and stars. Miracle. But this chapter title is from Moby Dick. And yes, it is the title of chapter 57 in Moby Dick. Do you see? Shapes in the clouds. So what is the Islamic response? Will those Muslims that stoop to absurdity stoop lower still and claim that the angel Gabriel also whispered into the ears of Herman Melville and Alexander Dumas? Will they be placing these men's names on a revised list of the prophets of Islam? Are the three musketeers in fact the three quarks inside a proton? Just for an experiment, I once sat down and glanced at some lines of poetry by William Shakespeare, as if I were Maurice Bucaille, the Catholic physician who started reinterpreting the Quran for Muslims in 1976, knowing they would pay millions if he told them that the science that threatened their beliefs was actually part of their beliefs. They just didn't know it because they, and all the imams, and all the Muslim scholars of the preceding 1400 years did not understand ancient Arabic poetry as well as a French doctor who never saw quite enough Islamic miracles to become a Muslim himself. Now, who has humiliated you here? Is it me, or is it the late and very far from great Maurice Bucaille, who milked your ignorance and your lack of understanding as if you were cattle rather than human beings? Using what I already know about science, I wanted to see if I could do the Bucaille trick and find any advanced physics in Shakespeare's poetry, and it was too easy. For example, what light through yonder window breaks? That could be a foretelling of the splitting of the spectrum of light through glass, the electromagnetic spectrum, and spectroscopy is how we figured out the Big Bang. So Shakespeare was telling us how to discover the Big Bang. Miracle. Then I could just copy and paste a page or two about spectroscopy, and the person reading just might be fooled into thinking all of it came from what light through yonder window breaks. Shapes in the clouds. If you are a Muslim and you think I am making your beliefs seem absurd, you're wrong. I'm just showing you why one modern interpretation, by a non-Muslim at that, of one verse is absurd. But many of you will react with deliberate intent to distract thinking Muslims, as if I said all Muslims are crazy and every word in the Quran is garbage. I cannot stop such people vomiting their absurdities onto the internet, but I can drive them on to ever greater absurdities, perhaps to the point where many rational Muslims, perhaps the majority of Muslims, can see the absurdity for themselves, and when they laugh, there is hope. The 57 miracle is too easy to explain. All the text really says is, all it ever said was, God gave us iron and it's useful stuff. By naming Surah 57 after iron, Muhammad, if it was Muhammad who named the 57th chapter, was obviously trying to impress upon his followers the value of iron in the Bronze Age, when iron swords cut through those made of bronze. Muhammad was an intelligent man. I might have done the same thing had I walked in his shoes. I would have mentioned iron. It was too important at the time to not mention it. I might have mentioned it in the Phil Helene's Quran in Surah 4. I might have put it in Surah 82. Or I might, by chance, have put it in number 57.